We're going to talk about philanthropy and social change this morning and money. But before we do, I thought I should take a few minutes to just explain to you who the heck is Tom Tresser and why should you listen to me as charity, philanthropy, and nonprofit pros. Well, over the last 40 years, I've started or led 14 nonprofits in the areas of community development, the arts, and civic engagement. I teach nonprofit management at a number of local universities. Recent civic work over the last, say, 7 years includes stopping the privatization of the parks system through a group called Protect Our Parks. I was one of the leaders of No Game Chicago. We fought for a full year to derail the Olympic bid. Remember that? It was the Olympics all the time back in 2009. And we went to Switzerland, to the headquarters of the IOC, to say no thank you to that disaster. Now, years later, all the papers and civic experts who were loving the Olympics are saying, woohoo, woohoo, what a great thing that we didn't get the games. Well, where the hell were they 7 years ago? I ran for Cook County Board President in 2010 on the Green Party ticket. I started something called the Civic Lab in the West Loop, which was a physical space for civic innovation, civic engagement, and civic education. We had a marvelous 2 years. Thousands of people came and went. We taught 75 workshops on all things civic. I started the TIF Illumination Project, and we explained what TIFs are, tax increment financing, which is a giant slush fund. And I've done 75 public meetings just in the last 3 years. So I call myself a civic educator and a public defender. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Civic Lab, as I say, was a marvelous place. This just gives you a few examples of what happened at this wonderful space in the West Loop. Meetings, classes, all kinds of convenings and making. We make stuff. We made stuff there. My approach to civic work, I think, is worth speaking about just ever so briefly. I do deep research into causes and conditions. I do deep research on the opposition. And there is an opposition in this work that we're going to speak about today. And I want to know is what's working. But I also do critical reflection on us, the good guys. We're the good guys. We're the guys who stand for justice, for inclusiveness, compassion, right? Holistic thinking, right? We care about justice. We care about the folks who don't have, right? We care about for everybody. It's not just me, me, me. So that's kind of who's in the room, right? Well, I am critical of us as a community, as a sector, if you will. I'm about building community, and I'm very big about building infrastructure. And that's, if you take nothing away from my talk today, just remember that word, infrastructure for justice. But it's got to be sustainable and scalable. I'm also very concerned about building the next generation of leaders. So it makes me smile that there are young people in the room because it's on you. My crew is about ready to hang up our hat. So we're going to be passing the torch of leadership to you, the people who are 30 and under. I consider it part of our job as elders to make sure that the next generation that's coming up, and even the generation after them, the kids who are might be 15 now, are smart and ready to go and have what they need to succeed and make justice. I kind of follow this kind of path of educating, fabricating, activating, and then repeating. So that's my vibe. My personal style is listen, learn, and lead, but in that order, and to serve. So they say, seek first to serve and then aspire to lead. That's how I roll. And I like to use the media, old and new school, because when you have no money and the foundations won't touch you, you've got to be smart about how you get the word out. Now, I just want to show you a few slides from a presentation I did 12 years ago. It was called The Politics of Creativity. I ran around the country trying to explain a little bit of what the infrastructure is going on the other side, on what we would call the far right. So there's a group called the Christian Coalition of America. They were founded after Reverend Pat Robertson ran for president in 1988. And I made it my mission to try to explain to people, especially people in the arts and people who are doing nonprofit leadership work, who the heck were these guys? They had the NEA in their sights. Remember that? The National Endowment for the Arts. Remember Culture Wars? Who remembers Culture Wars? Okay, that's about only a fourth of the room. But that's pathetic. that the America's nonprofit community and our arts community and the places that teach social justice and policy, that everybody in this room should know what culture wars was and what was at stake and how we lost culture wars. So that was how the far right made their bones, by beating up the arts. And I documented this stuff. So this is Pat Robertson. This is a mailing from 1992, ladies and gentlemen, where the Christian Coalition is after an art exhibit in Valencia Community College in Florida called Sense and Shivers. It had a few provocative images in there, but they sent these letters to the Valencia City Council saying, defund the arts, this stuff is homophobic, it's full of gay people, it's nasty, it's a-religious. So they were using all those terms to get people to kill the funding for the arts in Valencia, and they were successful. But this is the Christian Coalition's recruitment material. Think like Jesus, lead like Moses, fight like David, run like Lincoln. This is from 1992. And this is a letter from Pat Robertson. He says, we are training people to be effective, to be elected to school boards, to city councils, to state legislatures, and to key positions in political parties. This is what he said to his membership in 1992. And guess what? They did it. They did it. Up and down the country, all over America. So it's not a mystery why we have a Donald Trump in the White House, and a Bruce Rauner in the State House, and a Rahm Emanuel in City Council. It's because we didn't pay attention to what these guys were doing right out in the open. This is not secret. If I can find it and I can report it to you, believe me, and I had no staff, I had no budget, believe me, the folk with budgets and staff who were supposed to be on the watch failed us. So this is just the New York Times from 1992. Headline is, quietly Christian conservatives win hundreds of local elections. Now, I'm not speaking against religion, and I'm not speaking against Christianity. I'm speaking against the translation of right-wing values, wherever they're coming from, into public life. So if you believe in a woman should not get divorced, if you believe that a woman shouldn't have an abortion, or whatever your religious beliefs are, good for you. Keep them in your house. But when you run on them in public life and take that into the public sector, that is what I'm against. That is what the Christian Coalition is all about. And here I am just telling you that I was on the case in 1992. A little good did me. All right. And I just said it back in this PowerPoint presentation that I gave in 2005. The Christian Coalition has identified its base, located its base, and energized its base. They've expanded its base, they've trained its base, and then they've activated this base, raised money, and then they translated all this organizing into victory and policy. So that's how it rolls. It is basically American as apple pie. There's nothing secret or bizarre about any of this stuff. It's just they've been so much better at it than we have. That is my opening salvo to you. Okay, so here's a little video. It's about 6 minutes long.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden. And these will be our first priorities, and on these principles there will be no compromise. Now, so there will be no misunderstanding, it's not my intention to do away with government. It is rather to make it work. Work with us, not over us. To stand by our side, not ride on our back.
We didn't listen to Eisenhower, and we sort of forgot this industrial military complex. We sort of let them run amok so that we spent trillions of dollars, you know, on the war and war making. We didn't listen to him, but we did listen to this guy, and we're sort of been hypnotized to think that government is the enemy, government is incompetent. And believe me, as a critic of government here in Chicago, I am a critic of local government. I mean, there's a lot to criticize, but I believe in government. I guess that's another thing that I'm leaving you with. I believe in government as a solution to our pressing social problems. But we have to have good governors. Now, I'm just going to say that from Mr. Reagan's presidency, it's been all downhill, thanks to his policies. So we had a thriving middle class up until his presidency, but after he changed the tax laws, we now have the situation that we now see, and it was furthered by Clinton, it's furthered by the Bushes, and unfortunately it's been furthered by President Obama. We have a situation now where the top 1% control more wealth than at any time in the history since we've been taking numbers, going back to the start of the income tax in 1913. So that's the reality right now, where the top 1% control so much money, so much wealth. And who is really at the bottom of that heap? It's our African American brothers and sisters. So here we see the real household median income by race. The top number up here, that's Asian. This is white, not Hispanic. Then all races, that's this green line. Then Hispanic, any race. And then we have black down here. So look at that. That's $40,000 gap. That's a direct response, direct result of the policies that were put in place starting by Mr. Reagan. Now, they say home ownership is the American dream, but for so many people of our brothers and sisters, it's never going to happen. So here's home ownership. It's for all classes of people, it's declining. You can see that. But still, non-Hispanic white is up here. It's over the 70% mark. And down here, black alone, we're talking about just over 40%. So that's a 30-point spread. And since households is a way that you bank your equity, you bank your wealth, we can say that a lot of our African American brothers and sisters have no wealth. They have no equity because they don't have homes, so they're renting. And it finally leads to this very sad chart. This is a total household net worth. In 2009, the white folk are up here with a $265,000 median household worth. And down here, the African American families are at a net worth of under $29,000. This is a $236,000 spread, okay? That is insupportable. That is at the heart of everything that we're talking about here, or everything we ever will talk about. whether it's crime or health or you name it, you cannot have a society where that's kind of differential between a black family and a white family. It's just not possible. But it didn't happen by accident, my friends. It didn't happen by accident. We got here because it was engineered. It was done with intent. And therefore, the great American dream is a myth. You remember Horatio Alger, if you work hard, you pull yourself up by the bootstraps? BS. This chart shows steadily a decline in the likelihood that a person will make more than their parents. And that's, after all, the American dream, isn't it? Your parents struggle, you go to school, you blah, 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 and then you get a good job, and then you make more than your parents did, and therefore more than your grandparents. And is that the stereotypical American dream? Well, this chart shows it ain't happening. So the chances are, every year, of a person making more than their parents, statistically, is declining. Which means that the economic mobility in this country is flat. So this chart shows, again, the statistical chance of a person's earnings tied to their father's earnings or their parents' earnings is about statistically equal to England, right? We fought a revolution to get rid of the king, right? In England, if your father was the baron or the lord, then the son is what?
The baron.
The baron or the lord. What if the son is an imbecile? Still the baron or the lord.
Baron imbecile.
What if if the father is the shoemaker, and the son is or the daughter is a genius? What's the offspring? Could be a shoemaker. That's we fought a revolution to get away from the idea that you won't be bound by your caste. We don't like that word in America. But this chart shows that we're statistically even with England with its 2,000 years of feudal and monarchy heritage. We have not learned our lessons, ladies and gentlemen. And if you go to the right on this chart, you'll see Sweden and Finland and Norway. In those countries, which are of course much different than ours, the child's future is not tied to the situation of their parents. In other words, there's more economic mobility, there's more elasticity, there's more equity in those countries. So this American dream thing is a mirage. And it's on us to fix it. And that's the headline. Born poor in the USA, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to die poor in the USA. And that's not the world I want to live in. Now, unfortunately, we have more bad news. In Chicago, we get a trifecta of bad leaders. We have a multimillionaire mayor. We have a centimillionaire governor. And we have a billionaire president. And none of whom, I'm going to say, I'll just be blunt, give a fig about the values that we're speaking about here today. Justice, equity, fairness, giving people a chance, not enriching ourselves at the public's expense. This idea of the public good. Oh my God, what a concept. I'm going to say just flat out that these three guys don't care about any of that. Just recent headlines, I don't want to, we can really go into a deep depression here, but Trump has vowed to destroy the Johnson rule. Now that would essentially be an attack on the separation of church and state. And if that happens, we're back to a monarchy and a theocracy and a plutocracy all mixed together with a fascist orange twist. Trump moves to roll back Obama-era financial regulations, like we didn't learn from the failures, where we bailed out our financial institutions to the tune of $14 trillion. That's your money. We bailed out Lehman Brothers and Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo, which is a criminal enterprise. The Ninth Circuit Court declines to quickly reinstate the travel ban. So this is being litigated even as we speak. Today is going to be, the federal court's going to hear on whether that ban will stay in effect. This is just the first month. This is just the first month of the Trump presidency. Okay? So you get my sense of alarm. All right. The bad news, therefore, my friends, is that we are alone. Here in Illinois and Chicago. We're on our own, okay? Don't expect anybody to help us from Washington. In fact, the opposite. We're going to be punished. Things are going to be taken away from us. So they're talking about the sanctuary city and other things. They're just getting started. So the Trump administration will be no friend to Chicago. or I might say any blue city or blue state or blue anything. Bruce Rauner, our governor, is an enemy of Chicago. He's an enemy of unions. He's an enemy of education. He's a privatizer. So all these people are not going to send any help to Chicago either. Okay. So unfortunately, to deal with all this, we as a sector are bringing a knife to a gunfight. In fact, that's even generous. We're bringing this to the gunfight. Boom! Let the record show Tresser shot a rubber band in the audience. I hope I didn't kill anybody out there. So we're bringing a rubber band to a gunfight. Not even a good knife. So, here's my first of 3 challenges to us as a sector. Number 1, Illinois' nonprofit workers, leaders, board members, and constituents have got to organize to elect a governor of this state in 2018 who will champion social justice, equity, and service for all. Let me get an amen on that. Amen. Amen. Yeah. All right. That was pretty weak, but hopefully I'll convince you as time goes on.
Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, brother. So let's talk about numbers, since politicians are all about numbers, and it's a game of addition. In the governor's race in 2010, the margin of victory was 31,000 and change, called 32,000 votes. In the election between Van Quinn and the eventual winner, Rauner, the margin of victory was a little larger, 142,000 votes. That was the margin of victory to decide our governor. Now, as I said, we have a new race coming up in 2018. Well, how many people work in our sector in the state of Illinois? How about 518,000 people? And this numbers are old. So people who work in the nonprofit world, in our world, is more than 500,000 people. Pretty impressive. Then let's add. Remember, the margin of victory is so. That's how many nonprofits people are working. So you can see we have, by a factor of 5, over the last victory of between the governors. But there's more. These are the people who work in education. So these would be public workers, public sector workers. About 400,000. 400,000 people roughly make their living through teaching our children in the state of Illinois. So if you add the people who work in the nonprofit sector, plus our brothers and sisters in education, you get 903,000 allies. And that doesn't even include the board members. So if there's, just go crazy, say there are 10,000 nonprofits in the state of Illinois, and each board has 9 board members, that's another like 60 to 90,000 people you could add to that list. And then if you think each of these nonprofits have a constituency or clients, maybe 1,000 people. I mean, arts organizations serve tens of thousands. But some of our larger United Way agencies might deal with many, many thousands of people who cross their threshold. And if you add those people, I mean, we're well past 1.5 million people. So, challenge number 1, start organizing today. What are you waiting for? You need to call your leaders to the table. The people who are running these coalitions, the guys who run the United Way, and get them busy. Because if they don't act to organize to help change the election and get someone in power in 2018, then I'm afraid you're going to deserve what you get. Sorry to say that. Challenge number 2, buy my book. All right? I don't get a dime for doing this, but we gotta get this knowledge out there. Each one teach one. So I'm begging you as leaders to buy a book and buy ones for the people you love. Take it back to your organization, to your board members. Myself and the other authors, Jonathan Peck is here. He's one of our authors. He's one of the leading organizers in the city. We will come to you and do civic house calls, like we're doing this morning, like talking and getting into dialogue. There's a lot of material in the book. The first chapter is about the budget overall. So, as I say, Dr. Ralph Martiri is one of our top civic finance experts, and he wrote that first chapter. So that will take you through the city budget, and you will be armed and dangerous. You can have a civic fistfight with anybody in the city and hold your own about these important topics, because knowledge is power. And honestly, they would rather you not know. They would rather you be ignorant, and all the people that you work with would rather you not know. The book is divided into a couple of major chunks and to make it easy to talk about civic money in the city of Chicago. The first is money that's stolen from us. This is money that we should not have had to spend or continue to spend, and it's through corruption, essentially. Corruption and bad deals. It's a couple of $1 billion every year. So let's not do that anymore. You know, let's not have any more corrupt people run our operations, but it requires a change of political behavior. It's easier to say than do. We talk about bad bank deals that the city's gotten with, and we also talk about the cost of police violence, which is super real and is not going to affect most people in this room, but it is affecting our cousins and brothers on the west side and near south side, where folk are getting shot and rousted, and you can't put a price on a lost life, but unfortunately you can put a price on the settlements and the judgments. $600 million in 12 years, right? And that statistic alone should be enough to fire the mayor and everybody in city council. That is unacceptable. You cannot have a city at war with itself. But about 30% of our budget is spent on policing, and that's crazy. That's in the book. So again, we're raising some, tough questions, but I think it's time to raise them and get them answered. I have the second part of the book called Money That's Hidden From Us. This is money we know they're collecting, we just can't find it. It's out there somewhere. And this is tax increment financing, TIFs. So I am strangely obsessed with TIFs, and I study them and talked about them all over the city, and it's a giant slush fund. That's the best way to talk about it. There's $1.4 billion, $1.4 billion sitting in TIF funds right now that would be available if the mayor and the city council chose to liberate them back to the units of government. $700,000 would go to the Board of Education, and that would be a one-time bump. So you wouldn't have to close schools and cut schools. And just yesterday, another $49 million in cuts were announced for our schools. All told, since Emmanuel came into office, it's $2 billion in cuts. I've lost track of how many teachers and professionals. The last time I checked, it was over 2,000. But there's only 23% of our schools have librarians. Okay, that is just not acceptable. You can't be a city of greatness. You can't have a world-class city if kids are not reading at or above grade level. I mean, every child in Chicago has to read at or above grade level, let alone having an art teacher or a music teacher and all that stuff that we know. And class size, by the way, no more than 20. No more than 20, because that's what it is in the suburbs. Right? If you're a parent in the suburbs and you go into a classroom and your child out in Glencoe or Wilmette or whatever, and you walk into a class with 40 kids, you're going to throw a conniption fit. My God, you're going to be down there in the principal's office in 2 minutes. Right? And that's what happens out in the suburbs. It won't happen out there. But in Chicago, kids learning in the broom closet, that's standard practice. Unacceptable. So the mayor talks about making Chicago a world-class city by building another Ferris wheel. Right? They tore down the old Ferris wheel, which is a fine little Ferris wheel, and they tore it down and they built up a bigger Ferris wheel for $25 million. Because that's how these guys roll. It's all about tourism and pouring concrete and the 5 wards that are the main super loop. That's where all their thinking is, and that's where it's been since Daniel Burnham published his plan in 1909. It hasn't changed. A beautiful city means a city that's good for the rich people, or the white people, really. And so we run our city accordingly, and the other 45 wards, go screw yourself. Or the mayor would say it another way, but this is a family affair. I don't want to offend you, but he is not paying attention. But it's by design. As I'm saying, it's not new. This has been going on for 100 years. Money that's hidden from us. And finally, money we're not collecting. So this is where we get into civic imagination. We have some wonderful essays here about a progressive income tax for the state. So all the people that understand finances at the state level say Illinois has one of the worst, least progressive, that is to say, most unfair in America. There are only 3 states worse than us, and Mississippi is one of them. We're number 1 in being crappy, for being unfair. What this means is that the richest folk are not paying their fair share, and they're taxing the richest of us, like Jay Pritzker, who, after all, did nothing to earn his wealth. He had inherited it from his father and grandfather. And yes, Jay is a smart man, and if he were in the room, I congratulate him on his acumen for his investments. But brother, That money was given to you when you were born. He was the lucky sperm club that he's a member of. And he and his billionaires are not paying their fair share, and that's just a fact. So that is not okay. The states that have a progressive income tax are doing better. They don't have these structural deficits where the schools are starving to death and they can't build roads and they can't fund their initiatives. And then what happens is they ding us with all these taxes, like what was just happened now, a plastic bag tax and a soda pop tax and the red light cameras and regressive fees out the yin-yang that hurt the least of us. So we're going the wrong direction. So that article explains that, and it's written by the League of Women Voters, who's been on that beat for about 30 years. The second idea is a financial transaction tax. This is very simple. Put a tax on the trades on LaSalle Street. It would generate billions. The last idea is called a public bank for Chicago, and that's probably the craziest idea in the book, but it's based on a real thing. There's a public bank in the state of North Dakota. I invite you to read that article and really conjure what a bank would look like if it existed to serve the people, not rape the people, okay, and not send our money to Wall Street where those guys, we already bailed them out. So we're sending beaucoup profits, beaucoup bucks to Wall Street yet again. And a public bank simply raises this issue of, well, can we make a bank which makes credit available for life changes and life opportunities, like school home loans, school loans, saving your farm, starting businesses. These are the things where people need access to credit. Well, I invite you to study what they've done in North Dakota, a Republican prairie state, for over 100 years. This thing is a miracle, but you will never hear it discussed. In fact, none of these ideas were discussed at all in the City Council this year. The vote on the budget for 2017 was 48-0. Shame on them. They didn't even talk about these, though half the aldermen have the book, and so does the mayor. But it's going to take you guys pressuring your aldermen to demand a budget hearing in your ward now, even though the budget has been passed. You want to know what's going on, because you're going to get dinged $1,700 a year, every one of you who live in the city of Chicago, who pay property taxes, as a result of those decisions. Okay, so the challenge number 2 is get the books and each one teach one. Organize. Spread the knowledge. Challenge number 3, again, I sound like I'm selling, but I kind of am. Become a public defender. This is a new initiative of the Civic Lab. You go to publicdefender.us. This is what we're going to do with the Public Defender campaign. We're going to uplift the very word public. Because as you guess from my point of view and my neurosis here, I treasure public. If it's got the word public on it, I love it. So I say public, and you think what? Public what?
Education.
Public education. Public what?
Radio.
Public libraries. Public what?
Radio.
Transportation. You get it? We could have a long conversation about these wonderful things, including the parks. I love our parks. I love our beaches. They're second to none. But we need more. We need more. Fire department. You know, if anybody's ever had a fire in their house, you know, the fire department, you rely on them. Public housing, public health, and even public water. You know, Chicago is one of the pioneers of its public water system, and it's like something you don't even think about. But when every time you go to take a drink of water, the public is serving you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and we need to pay for these things, because that's what really makes the city great. It's the public stuff, not the private stuff. The private stuff sits on top of the public stuff. You get me? You can't have a robust public sector, the jobs and everything that they call, without the public sector first. The roads, the laws, the courts, the schools, the libraries, all that stuff, which we've maintained as a country for 200 years, that's what the private sector sits on. And they would have us believe it the other way around. But we've been hypnotized back to that guy, remember him, Reagan? Yes, that's him talking. So we need to like deprogram ourselves. All right. So the mission of the Public Defender Project will be to protect and expand the public sector, both its services and assets, and therefore to stop privatization. I am an opponent of privatization. We want to build an infrastructure for progress and justice. Remember my love of the word infrastructure. We're going to litigate, educate, and activate and train people. We're going to have a campaign school for people to run for office as public defenders. We want our public officials to be public defenders, not public thieves and public incompetence, which is what we have. This thing is going to be membership-driven and supported. Our first set of campaigns, we're going to litigate to take the meters back. Can I get another amen? Yeah. Amen. Take the meters back. You know, we went to the payday loan store there. I hope you realize that. We got $1 billion in ready cash in 2008, which we spent in about 10 minutes. And Morgan Stanley will reap $10 billion in profit over the life of the deal. $10 billion. Now, you know in your daily experience, you know there are meters where there were no meters. You know the rates have quintupled. And you know these meters are going way longer than they used to. You know that. Every day you know that. Well, you are reaping the benefits of the worst deal in American public history. We are ridiculed around the world for selling our meters. When activists and organizers are trying to explain these thorny concepts of public and private and why the public sector is needed, all they have to do is show a picture of a meter. That's all they have to do. And people in like Uruguay and Antarctica go, ah, what a stupid thing, you sold your meters. Yeah, it's so stupid, you know. Well, it's more than the money because we sold the right of way. We sold our policing powers. Anytime you sit down to talk about things like traffic congestion or getting rid of, lowering asthma rates, and all kinds of things that don't necessarily have the word meter on it, Morgan Stanley's at the table and they must be paid. When you take a meter offline, you have to pay $2 million or make that meter reappear somewhere else. So that's Morgan Stanley sitting at the policy table, and that is not how you run a city. That's why I say public first. All right.
Just change it to like, what is it, like an hour? Yeah.
Oh, no. Don't restart. Okay. We're going to end TIFs, okay? I'm just going to say we're going to litigate and end these things. On the civil rights basis alone, they're hurting our communities of color and our communities of modest means. They're not working. We're going to litigate to end them on the basis of civil rights. We're going to cut class size in half. We're going to fight. I mean, I think we need to be bold and breathtaking. Our children deserve nothing best, nothing worse. We want to reopen the clinics that were closed. People have died and will continue to suffer because our clinics went the wrong way. We need more, not less. And we're going to restore the cuts to the schools. So as I said, $2 billion in cuts since 2011. We need the arts, library, nurse sciences. You know, we need these things in every one of our neighborhood schools. Not any elite schools where people have to lottery their way in and, you know, try to gain their way into these schools, but every single school that a child can walk to needs to have this quality. And this, if we don't do that, then we're you know, letting ourselves down and we're letting the next generation down. These are some of the goals that we have. So, if you're interested, text I am in to this phone number. I will repeat the phone number later. You'll get a website. You go to the website and you can join. The first 1,000 members get a nifty pin, numbered. I'm wearing one here. It's got number 1 on it. So I yearn to yield out the pin with the number 1,000 on it. And together we're going to take Chicago back, and together we're going to fight for a robust public sector. If you give us $50 or more, you're going to get this great poster by our wonderful artist, Allison Susterich, Become a Public Defender, and it's got some of our campaigns up there on those little signs. So, as I say, text I am in to 312-635-4888, and my final question to you is, are you in?
Yes.
Thank you.